Because so many people who've had trauma, they have this like flush come over them, or maybe the trauma is such that they go numb and they go parasympathetic into almost a dorsal vagal response, and their head's down and they won't look. And then they start attacking themselves for that very experience. God, I suck and I can't engage. And it is the very attacking of what is actually this really healthy response in your history that is so much more traumatic.
Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the Complex Trauma Training Center. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. All right, today I am sitting with Dr. Kelley from Therapist Uncensored. Welcome to Transforming Trauma, Anne.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really am excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. And I'd love to hear from you what you'd like our listeners to come away with from our time together.
Oh, so much. I think if I had the biggest wish is that people would come away with less shame, less blame for the struggles that they have in their own relationships with their own emotions, and less stuck. I see so many people sometimes as a couples therapist where they get caught in patterns that they feel like are just hopeless. You know, we've been trying and trying, we're still, we can't keep trying, kind of a give up kind of feeling. And it probably was some of the motivation for me personally in developing some of the work we've done in modern attachment, because I find the update in it, the research and how it's all evolved, so hopeful, so promising. And I think it really takes a lot of shame and blame away. So if anything, I would hope people feel less pathologized and less pathologizing of the people that they're struggling with.
Great. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. And for listeners who aren't familiar maybe with your podcast, you and your partner, Sue, started this podcast. You were, and I think you said, I can't remember if it was before we pressed record or after, but that you were like educating people what a podcast is, like downloading the app on their phones. What is a podcast? What are we doing? And so you started doing the podcast, and I'm curious, from that, what you've seen, this growth that you've named in the work that you're doing and in the courses in your book and all the things that you've been involved in. What have you noticed in terms of that kind of unfolding?
Well, it's like, we come into it with our own education and biases from that education, right? And I had no idea how biased my education was. I thought I was going to get on with all this. I even said that, like, we're going to get on with all we've learned and we're going to teach people, right? Like, we have all this knowledge to give, which is kind of funny. And it's not that I don't think we have a lot of knowledge to give, but we only have like, a tablespoon of knowledge to share with the ocean out there. And I think we've both become a lot more humble and a lot more insightful. And we often say we've had to unlearn more than we've learned. I think that's also true for a lot of the research, right? We start with what we know, and then we try to explain everything with what we know. And then everything fits into what we know, right? Have you ever done that? Like, you go to a training and now you see everything under that lens of, oh, now everything makes sense. And I found that with attachment, and we did our most probably still listened to podcasts are the 4 that we did on attachment at the very beginning, episode, I don't know, 50 or something. We're kind of mortified by that and we haven't redone it. But it's like how to warm up activation or how to cool off when we're preoccupied. But we saw it very categorical, right? This is who you are if you are this, and then your partner may be this, and this is how you work together. And books were really organized around that. And people felt heard. It's like, oh my God, I finally understand why I can't quit thinking over and over and over again about something, or where my partner shuts down and goes away. And so there was so much relief in people going, oh, I see myself, right? But the thing is, as humans, we always want to categorize. And, we're doing a heck of a lot of categorizing right now, aren't we? Are you a Democrat? Or are you Republican? And if you're one and not the other, you're a threat. And we've grown so much in this idea how attachment really actually hits our body, how it manifests, how trauma lives on in our body. And the more we've learned, the more I guess there's many avenues to go down. One of the things we've had to unlearn, is the Western bias that attachment was just seeped in.
Yeah.
And that is how we were teaching the world what secure attachment should be and what kind of parenting it should be. And God, we could go down a whole episode of how much that's messed up our culture, especially for women. But we started recognizing that we don't live in any category. We're not only preoccupied. We're not only, avoidant. And that was so freeing. And it started to help us more deeply understand what happens in a relationship more organically. So our work over the years has been to read and listen and interview and read and listen and interview to really shift that model so that it's just more up to date. It's not like Sue and I have a model. I mean, we do, but it's only representing the wonderful research out there. It's not our great brain science. It's representing the research, but it's in a way that you can understand it and feel less pathologized, if that makes sense, and use it instead of just understand it. Because as we know, understanding something does not actually lead to change. But kind of believe, now that I know I'm preoccupied, I know how to do it differently. And we know that doesn't work.
Right. I just so appreciate how you're keeping the human as the focus, not like, oh, you belong in this box and I belong in this box and everything's really black and white. And you're naming, like, there's so much nuance, and humans are three-dimensional. We're not like flat, two-dimensional, I'm this and you're that. And so, I'm just really appreciating the way you talk about it and how human you are around it, and on the work that you're doing and on the podcast too. So many people are familiar with this term, like the idea of like secure attachment, and they might be less familiar with the idea of secure relating, which I know is something we were hoping to talk about, or I was hoping that you would talk about. So I'm curious how you distinguish the two. Is it okay if we go there?
Oh, yes. Like one of my favorite things to talk about. So thank you. Yeah. Well, because I think, again, we're talking about the transition. Our focus used to be how to help people have earned secure attachment, right? Which I love the idea of earned secure attachment. So many of us aren't born in a world, especially as therapists, right? Like we come to as therapists because we've often been dealing with and become the family therapist. It used to be that the focus was getting people into individual therapy so that they can then develop a more secure attachment. And once we have a secure attachment, we're going to relate better. And so it's almost like seen as a noun and a goal, right? And that's a very expensive goal, number one, and not very accessible to most of us in the world, meaning that would be a lot of therapy, depending on our histories of trauma and attachment breaks, to aim for that. To us, it feels very pathologizing. It is pathologizing because you're either secure or, guess what, insecure, right? So right there in the nature of your insecure or secure, there's this division that says, oh, I want security. And truth of the matter is, even right now, for those of us that were lucky enough that ended up with a secure base, we're in a world that is incredibly insecure. So it's a good chance you're not engaging in the world as a securely attached person all the time, right? And so Sue and I began using the word secure relating, and we think of it as more of a verb, it's an action, it's a journey, and it's a moment-to-moment state that we can work towards, and that we can work towards it in our relationship right this second, not when our partner goes to get more secure, or when we get more secure. Like, we can make active decisions to find ourselves in the body, in our own life, in our own world, to be able to then relate to our own body and the next person in a more secure way. And so that's how we see the distinction. Secure attachment is something that we might have because we had this really deep, developmentally sound, secure place that we grew up in, but many of us didn't. And even if you did, it doesn't mean you live and act with your partner in a secure way. And so we make this decision. How do we relate to someone in a secure way? Another thing we talk about, which I think is like, secure relating does not always feel secure.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're out there and something's threatening you and you feel activated and you don't feel secure, that doesn't mean you're not relating in a secure way. What you know is that you are activated, and an awareness of it, an awareness of how and in which direction. And then how does that impact how you engage with yourself and then remember the other person in the relationship? Right? Right? So if I'm completely activated and I go, oh my God, Emily, I feel so anxious and insecure right now. And I'm worried that I'm coming off too heady and not connecting to your audience. Well, that might be the most secure way I could relate to you because it's
Yeah.
authentic. I'm aware of my own body and I'm remembering you're out there and the show's important to you. Just a kind of a small example of how that's irrelevant of whether I'm securely attached or insecurely attached. It means that I'm engaging with you, being aware of you, being aware of myself, and being aware of the relationship. And we really have found the deeper that we understand our own styles, our own protection systems, we don't pathologize them and we don't pathologize one another. We can do that in a so much more engaging, less threatened way.
Mm-hmm.
And that periods of doing that, the more we learn to do that, guess what that does is it actually builds our attachment system in a more secure way. So instead of it being some obscure thing that we go out there in therapy and do, which I believe in, don't get me wrong,
Right.
I'm a psychologist, high believer in therapy, but it's in relationships that we heal, and it's not just the therapeutic relationships. It's how we take that therapeutic relationship or any other relationship and we learn to engage with one another.
Yes, I'm hearing this idea of like people can develop meaningful relational capacities, which is a different than like what you said earlier. It's like there's this static idea, either you have it or you don't, and you're shifting it into this like it's like there's a relational capacity, and moment to moment, what is it like for me to show up, and what does connection actually mean in this moment? How can I show up as a human in this moment? And yeah, that's really landing for me. That feels so true.
Yeah, exactly. That was such a great way to state it.
This concept of secure relating, like how does that create more room for possibility that you've seen?
Such a great question. I think it's really healing. I notice in my couples work how quickly when we move from trying to find who's the cause of the problem and we get
Mhm.
around the details, we come in feeling either like we're the problem or our partner's the problem. And I want to limit this to couples. Secure relating is in families. It's in the way we parent. It's the way we engage with our friends,
Yeah.
how we engage with ourselves. But the room you're speaking of is that it helps us, what I believe is it helps us center agency on ourselves. We so often can feel helpless, especially when I mentioned what I want people to leave with is that, oh my God, if you're stuck in this pattern, yeah, right? Which one of us doesn't go, oh my God, this pattern just keeps happening over and over and over again, right? Whether it's our
Mhm.
own personal thing, because no matter how I know better, I don't do better. Or I'm in a relationship and we get caught in the same triggers and the same argument spiral. I've rarely met a couple that doesn't have a familiar arguments, I guess Gottman's unsolvable problem.
Mhm.
And I feel like when we move, and I'm sure that's just my deep understanding and experience of people working with NARM is similar. It's like, oh, when we move into our own attachment systems, if our focus turns to the softening
Mhm.
of ourselves and our belief in other people are generally good, and that stuck pattern is that we're both really fighting for something that is probably extremely important, and we wouldn't elevate to this desperate note if it wasn't. When we recognize there's actually room for both of us in that
Mhm.
equation instead of one or the other. And I think attachment and neurobiology and the ideas of what's affecting us gives that opening because we're like, oh, what we're really fighting for. Let's say you have somebody walk in and the argument is one person, this is a very common one, like somebody's very, very intensely emotional and they are fighting to be heard, but they, very often feel like they're trying to point out, I want to be more intimate with you. I want to be more connected. And I don't feel very connected to you. Well, you can feel the desire for deep connection and love, but it's often coming out a bit overwhelming,
Mhm.
even for those that might feel like they kind of live more securely. But oftentimes we might be in a relationship with somebody whose emotional intensity is overwhelming
Mhm.
to them, and all they can hear is, you suck. You are failing me. I am trying to tell you that I need connection, and I'm telling you you're failing me. And they're not really saying that, but if I have an attachment embodied experience of needing to perform and never let anybody feel unhappy, Well, that's a direct threat. So for me to open up to this care of this person, I have to decide I suck and I'm failing. Well,
Mm.
that's not often an opening for, oh gosh, I really want to engage and open up to you. It's like, I'm going to shut down and run away. And by the way, I roll you and let you know that you're freaking overwhelming. And I'm sure this is familiar to a lot of your listeners, this dynamic. So getting back to the secure relating, when we start, maybe this person understanding that it isn't about their identity, but maybe they got caught in their own attachment experiences about not being able to mess up and not being
Mm.
able to, to engage in a way that says, oh, you're going to mess up and I'm right here and I can repair. And I
Mhm.
can understand why emotions are overwhelming to you. They were really threatening when you grew up. And then this partner's like, oh, you're not really shutting me down. You're overwhelmed and cutting off. I think it's a transformational shift into at least a more open conversation. It's not like that insight goes, oh, that's all we need.
Right.
But I feel like the engagement with that, as I mentioned before, it reduces the shame and it reduces the
Mhm.
blame and it so increases compassion
Yeah.
that I feel like it leaves more room for connection and healing. And in both those contexts, we teach how to securely relate in those moments instead of how to help him or her not be so avoidantly attached and help her not be so preoccupied. Those are big things to do.
Mhm.
And instead, if we moment to moment can shift, our bodies get safer with one another. And then we can engage with ourselves in a more secure way. Yeah. Okay. Well, we call it the modern attachment and regulation spectrum. So we call it MARS. What that is it's a model that is integrating the research that's out there into a visual image. Some of the premises of it is like how our bodies respond to activation and threat that is related to attachment. So people go, oh, I can use this information. It's not just great theory. I can engage with it. So we use colors to describe different types of activation that we get into that are specifically attachment activation. If a tiger's chasing us, I don't care what our early history is, we're all going to go in an upregulated way, or we're going to go flat, but we're all going to go in predictable neurobiological responses to that. And it doesn't matter early attachment. Like, who cares, right? We're a threat. But most of our activation, really, the threat that is creating that activation in us is attachment activation. And that is a threat to our belonging, our identity, and our sense of emotional safety. Right. And so that's the kind of thing that we're talking about when we're talking about the modern attachment, things that activate your attachment system. And we use colors. So we have what represents the preoccupied side, that is where we're going highly more activated, is the red. And we use blue to describe going down and freezing and more withdrawn, a little cooler. And then we use green to be the description of when we're in a more secure relating place. And we use a continuum. So it isn't like I am this or I'm not that, is where are you in the moment? So the goal is to understand where you fall on the continuum at any present moment. Where do you live more often? Because based on our early attachment history, we may use more dismissing or blue types of strategies, or we might use more red. And then we integrate disorganized or traumatic experience is still as colors, but we call it tie-dye because often when we have trauma that's hit our body, there's so many different ways we will respond. But if it's unprocessed trauma, our body likely feels overwhelmed and doesn't have a particularly organized strategy sometimes in the face of that either memory or moment. And so we could fluctuate. So we call it tie-dye because we might be using any mixture of it, including secure. Just because you
Mhm.
have a traumatic history does not mean you can't engage in a secure moment. But honestly, our rigid, defended experience in the world is protecting us from the puddle that we would fall into
Mhm.
if we softened our body and let people in. So our model centers around this visual image, but with deep discussion about how we engage in the world. And the visual is to help you sort of reflect on it. Again, non-pathologizing.
Yeah, I'm curious how what do you think really creates this secure relating in the present moment, or how do you witness that?
Well, I think the idea of, like we call the chapter organizing the disorganized, warming blue activation is one way we think about it, helping people find ways to warm themselves up if they've activated and shut off and cut off feelings instead of thinking they're the rational one, you know. And we talk about cooling red activation. So when you're highly sympathetic and activated, how do you yourself engage in a way that could bring you closer to the green so you can be seen and heard? And in a disorganized way, organizing the disorganized is like when we start going, oh, wait, I'm doing that thing that I do for this really important reason. Just organizing that, because so many people who've had trauma, they have this like flush come over them, or maybe the trauma is such that they go numb and they go parasympathetic into almost a dorsal vagal response, and their head's down and they won't look. And then they start attacking themselves for that very experience. And they start like, God, I suck and I can't engage. And it is the very attacking of what is actually this really healthy response in your history that is so much more traumatic, I think. And it distances you, you know, and we know that trauma is healed by having the experience and feeling less alone with it. So when somebody starts to recognizing that they're getting flooded or disorganized and then go, oh, wait, I am having an experience. I am not the experience. There's a distancing from the way that they protected themselves, and then a validating that they really needed to do that instead of a shaming. And then we can invite it in to like, in this experience, what could you attach to? So one of the things we talk about, if you recognize you're in a puddle, what are some ways to engage with that? Well, you can't engage all your rational thinking or you would not be in a puddle. So you can't say, recognize you're in a puddle, but you can know that you have some telltale signs. And when you start learning the telltale and you go, oh, I'm there. Literally, Emily, by naming it, right? It so takes it out of it. And all of a sudden now we have a meta experience of it instead of I'm in the experience of it. And so it makes it more movable, right? And then teaching people to recognize their own signs and that they're not their personality, they are their protections, and that there's so much other rich parts of who they are. And most often, then we're not in that place. How are those defensive strategies actually really helping you in your everyday life? And you don't have to give them all up. That's why, we don't want to make everybody secure people. Like, my God, the world is run by sometimes the most powerfully impactful people are those of us that have experienced serious trauma, because now we can connect to the pain of it. And then we can get it like so much trauma impacts that we need to grieve why we needed those defenses, not shame ourselves for having them.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm just feeling so touched in this moment. I'm thinking about the first time, I don't remember when it was, someone said something like, Emily, when children feel bad, they can't differentiate between a feeling is bad and they are bad. Like they just immediately are thinking, I'm bad. I'm a bad human. I feel bad and therefore I am bad. And I remember the first time someone said that, it was like my mind was blown. And it was like things inside of me just started like chinking into place. Like there was this moment where I was like, oh, it just, like you said, it's like this reorganizing. We're reorganizing that which is disorganized. And I'm just feeling so touched, like what you're saying. So many folks who are doing really rich, important work in the world have experienced really traumatic, they've experienced trauma in their bodies. And so this piece that you're bringing of like, how are you relating to it? And you even just helping them orient to this is, how did you say it? This is the experience, you aren't the experience, or how did you say that?
Yeah, this is the experience of protection you're having. It isn't you.
Yeah.
Right? Like what you said, you aren't bad. You're having a really bad experience in your body. And think how many people just live in that shame of, I am bad because I can't connect to my wife, or I overwhelm and I get so emotional, even though I tell myself I won't do it, or I yell at my child because I'm too activated. And then you have this shame that comes over you. And that is going to push you further and further out on the spectrum of relating. And yet you can't help doing that. And so I think I can recognize ways that I have been shaming as a therapist with the best intent possible. Trying to help somebody not feel shame. I can induce shame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we stay in a disconnected place with self-blame and shame and like working harder to try to be the best parent or feeling like we suck, we can't, it's too threatening,
Right.
right? And so if our core attachment activation, if we remember what it all comes down to, it is not about being fed. It isn't about, I mean, obviously we need to be fed, but lots of research discovered that's really not what early attachment was about, that we would choose softness over food, even when we're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
If we come back to what attachment's about, it's about belonging, a connection, sense of self-importance and meaning and value. And so if we believe in this part and we don't see it as a systemic, we stay in it. We stay in that activation that is about us and our failures and that we're the answer. And so it's stagnating. And so entering in systemic is huge, not to just give you a pass. We still need to be an attachment, a healthy attachment figure as much as possible, is good enough. But we have to get attached to ourselves in that one moment of that we are taking on all the blame. And what else can we integrate in this? Right. And for a while, my resistance, and I don't know if you find this, but a lot of times when you try to help people do early attachment work, and you try to look at their parent, especially if their parent had suffered so much for your behalf, the idea of saying, yeah, well, now let's start to blame your parent, you notice they resist that. And men resist that tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I shouldn't say men, I'm over genderizing it. Those that land more and more of a dismissing blue attachment struggle, we can't integrate this figure that was also our savior is also being part of our pain, right?
Right.
But it is both and. But when you add systemic culture to it, there's a softening because you can then see, like I could start integrating more of how my mom wasn't there for me once I could integrate that the society wasn't there. And then I could soften and start to think of my own grief.
Yes.
Right. And attachment work often is about being able to get in touch with our own grief rather than avoiding it.
Mm-hmm.
And this part of us that stays connected to ourself. And the more we can bring ourselves in, what am I feeling in my body? Yeah. Where's that activation coming from? Instead of trying to make it go away and then feeling compassionate for it. I'm activated for a reason. I might not know what it is, but that's okay. I just know that I am. And what do I need? How do I become my own best friend in that moment so that I can just find a secure footing? And that is so much more doable than how do I get from a preoccupied state, a preoccupied way of being in the world to a more secure? How do I become more secure? How do I put a foot on the ground? And it really brings up somatic work, doesn't it? It brings up, if I can find my body, if I can notice I'm activated, then I can be more centered with myself. And then in doing that, I can get more relational to the person who I might be activated by or with. And I think that relationships are so co-regulating, right? And so if I find my footing, whomever I'm with is going to find their footing more. That is just at least more. Doesn't mean perfectly. I think where I notice it really difficult to recognize a disconnection is when we're in more of our blue cutoff space or individuals that live there and they're like, I'm fine.
Yep.
If she would be happy, I would be happy. If he would just stop complaining, and they can't feel activation. And we I think, for so long made the idea of activation be about emotional explosiveness.
Right.
And it's so interesting when somebody's lived in the blue, they don't even grieve that they don't have connections. They can't feel it because if you don't know it, how do you feel it? So when your spouse is saying, I don't feel connected to you, and you're like, what are you talking about? We talked all last night. I woke up next to you. This makes no sense to me. So not only does it feel like a threat to them, it really doesn't. It's not that they're being stubborn.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's that they can't find their own missing of connection because they've cut off access to it.
Yes. Can you speak to, there's one other part of that I'm curious to hear from you around. There's a part around, I feel like our culture sort of celebrates this staying self-regulated, like get yourself regulated. You got to be cool and chill, cool as a cucumber. And if you have emotions, then it's not okay. And so that's sort of like pathologized to even have emotions. And so I think that can kind of feed this idea of like, if you're cut off from your emotions, that there's somehow this, oh, well, then I'm better. I'm somehow, got control of my emotions and I don't actually feel them. I'm sort of just throwing this out there. I'm not saying this perfectly, but you're nodding your head. So I think you know what I'm talking about. But like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
if someone's bypassed that completely, or they sort of are like, well, that's celebrated. That's what everyone's telling me to do, is to get myself regulated, and look at me, I'm regulated. And it's like, you're actually saying that's not even regulation. That's a total cutoff. And
Right.
differentiating that. Yeah.
Actually, I love that you just said that, Emily, because that's probably, again, one of the most powerful reasons why I even started, when Sue and I started developing the visual model.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons for me that I want to develop a visual model is I literally would draw a picture with couples and I would show a continuum,
Mm-hmm.
and I would help that individual recognize that they are actually dysregulated. And that was novel, right? And you would have to help them connect to their body because they had disconnected from their body. And one of the things we talk about in our course and in our book is that a lot of what we do impacts, and I'm sure you talk about all sorts of this on your podcast, our early attachment and how we've been taught in the world to be affects how our neurons get connected. And so when you have been raised in a way that emotions are shaming, which is in our culture, and rational thinking is highlighted, and we make fun of people for having emotions or for being hot-headed, as we know we do
Uh-huh.
for women.
Mm-hmm.
The message to men is so bad for them because
Yeah.
it's like, if you're doing that, think of all the pejorative words that are used for a man who shows emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, it's so much harder to have emotions than it is to cut off. And what happens in session is that they would, often like eye rolls and signs. And you would say, what would it happen in what's going on in your body when you start to eye roll her emotions? Well, and they'll say, no, what's happening in your body? And they start noticing that their heart rate's going up, right?
Yeah.
That eye roll is not just dismissing, right?
Right.
Where you ask them, what would it be like right now to turn and look at your partner in the eyes right now? Because you're feeling pretty rational, right? You're feeling like you kind of
Mm-hmm.
know what's right. Or when you turn around and just gaze at her eyes.
Mm.
And you know what happens? They can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? I want to fly out of this room. I hate this.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll sit in a compassionate way to say, that must be such a hard experience. But can you feel the dysregulation? The idea that when
Mm-hmm.
you're in the blue, you are just as dysregulated and sometimes more.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we end up reframing it is that if your defense posture is in the red or more preoccupied or in the tie-dye and more disorganized, kind of unresolved, both of those continuums are actually really connected to the value of relationships.
Say more about that.
Well, why we're activated in the red is we feel a threat to the relationship. We're going to either lose it or lose ourselves. So we're activated.
Mm-hmm.
That's a wonderful thing on some level because we're saying
Mm-hmm.
relationships are important.
This matters to me. Yeah.
This matters. And when we're in a disorganized state, if we're not completely cut off and in the blue, which we can be in trauma, but if we're at least in the tie-dye and we're shaking it around, we are realizing that rejection's scary and we don't want it. And, I have to protect myself because I'm going to not belong or I'm going to be that. We're connected to the value of human relating. But when we are in the blue state or the dismissive state, which we are totally promoting in our system right now,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly promoting it.
Yeah.
In terms of black and white, right, wrong. See, all of these are neurodevelopmental things when we're activated, right, wrong, black and white. If you're in a black and white, good and bad, you're activated. I'm just sorry. You're
Mm-hmm.
activated. I'm overstating it, but in general. And that when we're in the really blue state, we disconnect from our own need from that relationship. I don't care. Go to hell. I'm going to go to my office and I'll be back in, I don't know when, if ever, until you calm down and you become rational. In other words, you make it safe for me to come back in and then I'll value the relationship again. And so if you're in a relationship with that dynamic, or if that is your dynamic, also feel compassion. It's that threat. They're not being an ass. I mean, don't get me wrong. We can all be asses. But oftentimes that is that they are so afraid. They are more fragile to experience their emotions and so disconnected that they have to cut off the value of it. And what's so sad, and we talk about this in our course, and that's when we say how to warm up the blue.
Mm.
Blue becomes icy, and we can all
Mhm.
get blue if we get too activated, right? That's normal. But
Mhm.
you live there. You can go, screw you, I'm done with you and I'm out of here. And you can cut off and go to work and not think. But if you live there, that's something to look at because we have to warm up connection to self. If I'm cut off
Yeah.
and not valuing, and I don't think I need it, and I have my emotions and they're too much, and I have a pattern of relating that way, then be compassionate to yourself and recognize that you are scared to death of even relating. And by the way, when you really attach to it, you're scared of loss too, and you're scared of non-belonging, and you need just as much.
Mhm.
And so the other people in your life going, I want more connection. I don't want you to disappear. I don't want you to cut off. They're doing you a favor. They
Mhm.
really are a gift. And if you're the one feeling that, bringing that to your spouse in a loving way could be the guest gift you give them as well.
Mhm. Mm. Oh, I appreciate you going there, first of all. There's so much there. But I'm wondering, how do you think therapists can maybe accidentally, because I'm thinking of obviously my own caseload, my own folks that I'm working with. Sometimes I feel like we could accidentally recreate some of these dynamics in the treatment and might miss the boat here in terms of helping our clients move beyond the dynamics if we're recreating. And so I'm just, again, holding kind of my own, what comes up for me as a therapist. Maybe it's countertransference. How am I dealing with this? But yeah, could you speak to some of those dynamics maybe in the therapy room and how you look at that or hold that?
Oh, I'll try to be concise. That's such a complex. But first of all, I
I
certainly
know.
have done that.
I know.
Reactivated things for people. Boy, in an unaware place. One of the things we love doing and I think your podcast is the same way. Our book and our course are both written for therapists and clients alike. And a shared language is so wonderful. So we love it when therapists and clients are both sharing the same language and maybe both read. And it's very often either a client hands it to their therapist or therapist vice versa. But I think why the reason I'm saying that is that I think as therapists, we're going to be just as impacted in our nervous system by whatever's coming from us, right? Like I'm thinking of the avoidantly attached individual that says, this is making us, you're doing nothing. This is like really challenging our sense of being helpful and worthy and knowledgeable. And it activates us, right? Like, so for me, it's like, I have to be aware sort of where I am in my most secure related place and recognizing when I'm activated and being open with it. Like I'm finding myself curious. I feel like curiosity is our best friend.
Mhm.
I find myself curious every time you come in and you keep talking about the money being
Mhm.
like that. I find myself pretty activated by, like self-exploring that. Like, is this common? Like I'm finding myself respond in this way and to be curious, obviously, and to be able to use it as an active part of the work, right? Like I'm really big into statements of credibility. Like I think you're such a wonderful individual. I don't think you would mean to try to communicate that I suck at this. But is that what you're feeling? Because if that's what you're feeling, I'm okay with that. Like we can talk about
Mhm.
this and I'm open to that because I'm really happy that you're giving me feedback. But is
Mhm.
that what you're meaning to communicate? Is that what the intent is? Or is that just the impact?
Oh, I
Right.
love this.
And so now the person is brought into curiosity because it could be, and I could
Mhm.
just be feeling insecure because I want to please you. But I wonder, I
Mm.
find myself really wanting to get your approval. Do a lot of people feel that way to you? And this is often
Mm.
somebody who's running their own company and da 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 da. And I'm like, it's interesting. My body's responding in the same way, right? So I think we can use it not to always be perfectly secure in the moment, but to be
Yeah.
reflective when we get pushed out on the continuum, on the spectrum, which direction, and be curious why. I
Yeah.
feel like the most powerful thing as a therapist is curiosity in ourselves and then inviting it in the relationship.
Mhm. Oh, this is so rich, and I love how you're illustrating in the moment, we don't always have to be so secure about where we're at, and naming it is such a powerful way of, like, getting curious with the humans that we're sitting across from, getting curious about their experience and how this information that is living inside of us or coming up for us might actually be so supportive in the work.
Yeah, and modeling that
Yeah.
we can make mistakes and feel insecure because
Yeah.
if we're this always secure person, how are they going to bring their foibles and vulnerabilities to us?
Yes.
Right? Like, and I do think our Western model taught us to be the experts that never give off anything but
Right.
confidence. And I don't believe in that anymore.
Right.
I feel like that's been a disservice that I've helped create more of an insecure dynamic rather than, wow, I can see that I've messed up there. And then we're just modeling being able to be okay with rupture and repair. And like, maybe I haven't been as helpful because I think I've been really in this, don't you see with you, haven't I? Like, and maybe I'm activated. And so I really think the more authentic we are with our own activation, our realness, our own vulnerability, that's really what therapy is all about. So I've had to give up some of my own training and
Yeah.
become more human instead of more the expert. But sometimes that's hard because, it's vulnerable.
There's letters we all worked for, and
Oh,
we
for
want to
sure.
kind of identify with that. No, I just so appreciate this and just so appreciating how you show up here in this moment, but also in all the work that you're doing. So I wonder if you could share with us a bit about I know you have a book and you have a course, and there's some cool
Oh,
things
thank
that
you so
that
much.
y'all are doing.
Yeah, we have a book. It's called Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World by Harper and Collins. And we're very proud of the book because it's very integrative of all the research, but it's also written in a way that we have one chapter that if somebody you love is struggling with a lot of blue activation that doesn't want to go to therapy, you can just hand it to them there. And it starts with, I bet somebody just handed you this book.
I love it.
Because we understand that and it's been from a compassionate place. And so we're really, really happy to have been able to take all of our experience on the podcast and in our own work with beautiful and wonderful clients and kind of have an avenue to put it in that is kind of representative of our work. So really proud of that. And it has all the images that we've spoken about. And what we did, because there's a lot of people who are not readers out there, we did a 6-hour course, believe it or not. It's 6 hours of Sue and I talking together with you, the listener, and we walk through all of this in a real live way where we bring our own vulnerabilities, our own struggles. It's less than the cost of most individual therapies. So it's one session and you get 6 hours. And it's really done out there because it's just our desire to kind of give this rich work in a way that can be the most usable, which is kind of our mission. How do we make it the most usable and accessible? And I feel really proud of the course. It's called Beyond Attachment Styles. You can get CEs if you're a therapist out there, 6 hours of CEs. But please don't be dissuaded if you're not a therapist because it wasn't made for a therapist. And you could do it you could do it with your partner, either live together or your children, adult children, live together independently and talk about it. That's our hope.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Thank you for sharing all the work that you're doing. But thank you for coming today and taking this time.
I really appreciate the interview. I just love sitting here and talking with you and learning. I've learned a lot from your podcast
Thank
and the
you.
process of talking about trauma and NARM and how integrative it is. So it's really fun to get a chance to talk with you.
It's great to be with you.
Great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more information about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at complextraumatrainingcenter.com/transforming trauma. As a mental health professional, your commitment to healing and growth inspires us. We at the Complex Trauma Training Center are committed to supporting you in your well-being and success. That's why we're honored to invite you to our Space Program 2026, an inner development program of support and self-discovery for therapists on the personal, interpersonal, and transpersonal levels. Please visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com and secure your spot in the 2026 Space Program.